I wonder, has execution ever been a challenge for you? Well, it has been for me, and probably more than I'd like to admit. But this time is most definitely different. And so, as we are entering into this new year, I have some content that I want to share with you that I'm sure is going to probably change your perspective about what execution looks like moving forward. And there's one thing that I think is unique that I have not heard anyone else share about. And so, in this video today, I'm going to be talking about this one thing and some questions and some things for you to ponder over in order for you to execute like a pro in this new year. And if you could do me a favor, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, and share this with someone you know. I would truly, truly appreciate it.
Today's topic is related to us disrupting self-sabotage and embracing success. So I'm going to ask you a question after I share just a little bit of context as to what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to talk about ownership as a way to disrupt self-sabotage, and ownership in you becoming the authority of your story through self-leadership. And so in Genesis 1:26, it talks about, let us make man in our image and in our likeness. This is God collaborating with the Holy Spirit and Christ to make us and form us into his likeness. So with that, there is a form of self-leadership and our ability to make and create and build up ourselves internally, of course, not absent from the Holy Spirit and God. And then it moves into Genesis 1:28, where it talks about us being fruitful and multiplying and to subdue the land and to have dominion. So I'm going to read actually Genesis 1:28 from the New Living Translation. And so it reads, then God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and govern it, reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, and all the animals that scurry along the ground. So with that being said, I want to process this with you all. So when we're talking about ownership, it is necessary that we become. Before we can possess anything, before we can do anything as it's connected to God's will and his purpose for our lives, we first have to become. And so I'm going to read from a few of my notes. When God says to be, he talks about being fruitful. That means to produce good results. So when we're going back to ownership, what we need to use to disrupt self-sabotage, how are we being fruitful? How are we producing good results? Then following that with multiply. How are we increasing, let's just say those results or what we're producing in quality and quantity? How are we making them better? How are we creating more? Again, going back to being in God's image and his likeness, because with that, we possess his character. And his character is representative of us owning who we are and operating in the authority for which he's given us so that we can optimize what he's given us in our lives to steward. Then do replenish. Replenish meaning to restore to God's original design. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We all know Genesis 1. And it gives literally a breakdown of all of the book of Genesis in that particular one chapter, or what God intends for us to experience on earth as it is in heaven. And so at the end of the day, Revelation shows us that it's all in God's intent for us to bring us back to the beginning, how he originally designed it. But of course, with sin, with death, with all the things that happened back in the garden, we now experience life differently. But the ultimate intention of God is to bring us back and restore us back to his original design. So in our doing, we are to, as a vessel of God, as being in the image and likeness of God, are to be in a place that our Jew restores things back to God's original design. And of course, in the way that He's gifted us and talented us to do. In addition, we're supposed to subdue, meaning stewarding what God has called us to manage. We each have an assignment. We each have a call, a purpose, something that God has uniquely given us by way of our gifts or our talents that He wants us to manage and steward well. That's in our doing. Again, that ownership aspect. And then lastly, to have dominion, or in other words, authority over your assignment or your responsibility, as I mentioned. So when we're talking about ownership, when God says, let us make man in our image, meaning the taking authority so that we can optimize our life, we're supposed to be, do, and have. So my first question to you is, what is a practical way to demonstrate self-leadership? What is a practical way to demonstrate self-leadership? So now I want to consider how we can reinforce this disruption mechanism of ownership as a way to build our capacity in this area, to remind us I'm taking ownership, I'm taking responsibility, I'm being led, by the Spirit of God. I'm allowing God to reinforce the ownership that He's given me, the authority that He's given me to lead a life of good stewardship and to be able to manage what He's given me well. So I want you to consider what is called a board, or rather a personal board of directors, to keep you accountable. Now, when it comes to accountability, we already started off with the ownership. It's us taking responsibility of whatever goal, plan, aspiration that we want to achieve, essentially making a promise to ourselves to do the thing. And then that second part to accountability is sharing what that promise is with other people to elevate your ability or elevate your capacity in some way to actually execute on this thing. Because again, this conversation is being able to execute like a pro. And what often gets in our way is ourselves. And just to eliminate that second blocker of other people or our environment, building community around us for us to be successful in whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish and execute on. So I want to read Proverbs 15:22. It says, plans go wrong for lack of advice. Many advisors bring success. So when I talk about a personal board of directors, let me explain. It's getting 3 to 5 people who are at the same level. You want to have kind of like a balance of people, and or excelling above you, about 2 to 3 steps, if not more, above you, to reinforce the promises, the commitments that you've made to growth, that you've made to boldness and being optimistic, that you've made to be reminded of the victory and the accomplishments that you had to celebrate you. And I would even create a document where you're writing out the things that you want to accomplish, and for this group of people to keep you accountable. Now you can meet with them on a regular basis, something weekly, monthly, bi-monthly, however often you want to connect. Have a group of people around you that are at your level or ahead of you in some way, whether in business, in your personal life, people who you aspire to be, some mentors or advocates or people in leadership that would agree to be your personal board of directors to either reel you back in times of challenge, or to remind you what you said you were going to accomplish. And so the second question I would love for you to explore is, what are some qualities of a good board of directors? Who will you ask to keep you accountable to self-leadership? Again, that very thing that's going to keep us from operating in self-sabotage, the very thing that's going to get us to embrace the success that we say that we desire.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation on cultivating courage and doing so by becoming a pro at execution. And so, if you could do me a favor and go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, and share this with someone you know, I know that they will be truly, truly blessed by it. And until next time, let your soul work be your best work to a better you. Toodles.